Well, good morning. How are we doing today? Good, good, awesome. Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. This summer, we are going to go over the Beatitudes together. And I'm really looking forward to jumping into this because when you look at the text of Matthew and you see kind of Jesus' 3 years of ministry, this is really the first time that Jesus begins to speak. And there's something about the first words that people say, right? You know, like there's something about that first impression. There's something about the first time that someone speaks when you meet them that's important, that sets the tone for the rest of the time together. And so we're going to look this summer at the first time that Jesus spoke to his people, to his followers. Now, there's some work that we have to do before we kind of jump into the text. And so today we're looking at Matthew 5, 1 through 3. But there's some work that we need to do in order for us to really understand like the full scope of what's happening. And so when we look at a text and we see what's happening, we have to look at several different environments or several different contexts of what's going on so we can really understand it. It's important as someone who wants to understand the Bible that when we come to something in the middle of a text, in the middle of Matthew, that we understand what precedes it. It's also important that we know what the environment is of the day, the political environment, the religious environment, and the understanding of what people are looking for in that moment. And so as we jump into this, let's look at what precedes this text. So you look at Matthew chapter 1 and we see Jesus' genealogy. It traces Jesus from Abraham to David, and all the way down the line. We see the birth of Jesus, the virgin birth. We see the worship of Jesus by Magi in chapter 2. We see so many fulfilled prophecies in chapter 2, 13 through 23, that he would come out of Egypt, that Herod would try to stop him, that he would be called a Nazarene. We have John the Baptist announcing him as king in chapter 3. We have the baptism and sonship, like God affirms Jesus in chapter 3. We see that in chapter 4, 1 through 11, that Jesus goes out into the wilderness and defeats Satan. We see the beginning of ministry in chapter 4, verse 12 through 25. And then here, we have then the Sermon on the Mount. Now, okay, so why is that important, George? Like, why is that such a big deal? Because the book of Matthew is actually written to Jews. And so when you track what Matthew has done in this moment, think of it like this. They've been anticipating the Messiah and hoping for him. They've been longing for him. They've been waiting for him to come. They traced Jesus' birth back to Abraham to fulfill that prophecy. Hey, there's a line of royalty here. There's a line of blessing here. There's a line of covenant here. Then he was born through a miracle. He's not some ordinary man. He was proclaimed and honored as the Messiah by the Magi at a very early age. Then he fulfilled prophecies through the Old Testament. He was announced king by John the Baptist, affirmed by God, defeats Satan's temptations, calls his disciples, performs miracles, and now he speaks. And so he's looking in at the Jewish people and he's saying, hey, something significant is happening right now in your midst. Something significant happened just a few years ago, and it's so important that I've taken 28 chapters to tell you all about it. And you Jew, like you person looking for the Messiah, let me convince you right now that this is the guy you are looking for. Now, when you look at the Jewish environment right about now, you see four sects of really the Jewish faith. It's a very complicated time in history. The Jews are under Roman rule. And so you have underneath this Roman rule, these four types of Jewish sects kind of rising up. Think of it as Baptist, Methodist, Presbyterian, those sort of things. All have kind of this looking for a Messiah, but they all kind of have different flavors at the time. And so you have the Pharisees that believed that right religion consisted of divine laws and religious tradition. That their primary concern as a Pharisee was adherence to the Mosaic law and then all the traditions that have been handed down to them. Very methodical in nature, very traditional. And not only that, that true spirituality to them was internal and not external. These are people who think that the way they live will justify them at the end. The way they live, the adherence to the law will justify them at the end. So you have the Pharisees, and then you now have the Sadducees. These guys were actually like the religious liberals of the day, who discounted most things supernatural. So the miracles of Jesus here, they really struggle with. And these guys begin to modify Scripture and tradition to fit their own philosophy. And so they began to think, hey, if it's man's way, then it's more important than God's way at times. When they start going and taking their philosophy all the way to the extreme. And their thought is, hey, if I can't explain it, then it can't be true. If I can't explain what's going on, then it can't be true. Then you have the Essenes. The Essenes. These are a real unique group right here. Their thought is that right religion meant separation from the rest of society. They were the Amish of the group. They were the ones who decided, hey, we're going to live in remote, barren areas away from the city, build great furniture, and sell it to everyone else. That's what they thought. That was what they were going to do. They were going to remove themselves, adhere to the traditions of what was passed down to them, and remove themselves in such a way where they don't have any stain of the culture or stain of the world. Their thought was that it's a matter of the heart, not the body. And so these people would never be seen at the movie theater. These people would never be seen with a TV in their house. They have removed themselves so they won't have any stain of the culture at all. Then you have the Zealots. These are the ones who are fanatical nationalists whose thought that their right religion centered in radical political activism. Hey, we're taking back our country. We're taking back the city. We're taking back, and when it all went wrong is when you people were in charge, and so now we are going to take it back. And so their religion led to revolution in a way. And so you have this environment all under the umbrella of Judaism. You have the Pharisees, you have the Sadducees, you have the Essenes, and you have the Zealots, all of which are looking for a Messiah. And what's fascinating at this moment is that they are all gathered together. You see, Jesus begins to appeal to every single one of them. And what's unique about it is every single one of them will be corrected here inside the Beatitudes. Every single one of them, Pharisees, Sadducees, Essenes, and Zealots, will now be corrected and now be shown that God is not interested in outward tradition. He's not even interested in taking the government back. He's not interested in removing yourself from the culture. No, He's interested about our heart. And He's interested about what's going on in your life, in our life. And so we have this complicated culture, this complicated time in history with a group of people that are about ready to hear what's going on, and Jesus begins to speak into them. Look at Matthew 5, verse 1. He says, seeing the crowds, He went up on the mountain, and when He sat down, His disciples came to Him. Look at what happens literally right before that in Matthew 4:23. And he went throughout all Galilee, teaching in synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. His fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, epileptics, and paralytics, and he healed them. And great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. So Jesus' fame begins to spread, and all of these people begin to sit and peer into what this Messiah is going to say. And it's the first time that we see him preach a sermon. And it's chapters 5 through 7. If you read it out loud, it will take you about 18 to 25 minutes, depending on how quick you read out loud. Short, quick, to the point. Some of y'all are hoping that's what today is going to be like. Short, quick, and to the point. But here's what's interesting. I want you to notice the posture that people have, that his disciples have at the very beginning. He says, seeing the crowds, he went up to the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. If we want to get everything that we want to understand, everything that Jesus has out of the Beatitudes this summer, our first posture has to be one of coming to the Lord. And coming and sitting at his feet. Coming and being at his presence, at his point where we can experience his presence. You see, how many times are we so busy, or have we so filled our day, or taken our phone and somehow numb this feeling of isolation that we don't actually come and sit with the Lord? So often I hear people come to me and they say, hey, I just don't feel close to the Lord. And my question is, well, have you sat with him? Have you been with him? Have you gathered around and listened to him teach you? Because if we want to get what God wants us to have out of this next few weeks, then we have to come, and our posture has to be one of sitting right next to him. It's so often our culture leads us to go, 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 go. So this Messiah opens his mouth, and here's what it says. We're going to look at verses 2 and 3. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now, we've looked at this verse a little bit, but we really haven't diagrammed it and gotten down to what it really means and broken it down. This word blessed in the Greek means happy. It means happy. That's it. It means happy. And this word happy is defined by a person that is characterized by transcendent happiness. Okay, so I want to paint a picture of this because it's important. It's not based on grades. It's not based on financial situation. It's not based on how many friends you have on Facebook. It's not based on your plans on Friday night. It's not based on your weight, what others think about you. But rather, this idea of happiness is a characteristic that God has actually, and comes to us in a way of contentment inside of our soul. You see, God is actually defined by this word. David in Psalm 68:35 says, blessed is God. And when the Old Testament in the Hebrew was transliterated from Hebrew to Greek in the Septuagint, the word that was used at that moment was this same word, which is blessed, happy is God. It's used in Solomon in Psalm 72:18. Blessed be or happy be the Lord God, the God of Israel, who alone works wonders. And then Paul in 1 Timothy 1:11 says the glorious gospel of the blessed God. So it's this characteristic that God has, that Jesus wants to instill inside of us, this contentment, this happiness, this transcendent joy that is not based on any one of our situations, but rather is based upon God coming into our life and speaking hope and joy over us. That's what that word blessed means. And we've talked about this next word, blessed are the poor in spirit. And we've talked about how there's two words, Greek words, poor but not a beggar, and then poor, like I'm dependent on another person to help me. Poor like I have no options. And this word here is poor like I have no other options. I'm completely dependent upon someone else. So he says, blessed are the poor. Happy are the ones who think they can't go anywhere, who need desperate help. And then it says this, in spirit. And this word spirit is the same word that Stephen used in Acts chapter 7, where he says, he called out, Lord Jesus, receive my spirit, as he was being stoned. So it's the very breath of life that we have. So if we put this all together, it says, happy are the ones who, at the very core of who they are, know they need help. That's what that Beatitude says. So when I was in high school, my senior year, I started the baseball season on a tear. I mean, literally, I was hitting .450. I still remember it to this day. And I remember, like, in a tournament to win, off a pitcher who was eventually going to the major leagues, hit a triple to win the game. And I remember later on in that tournament, I was waiting. I was down 0-2, and like this pitcher was throwing a no-hitter against our team. I was down 0-2, and I took this pitch, and I'm going to paint a picture for you non-baseball folks out there, but it's the spring, and that's the only sport that's playing right now. The NBA's over, NHL's over, and so this pitch was outside, and I kind of stayed in on it, and I drove it like opposite field, right over the first baseman's head for a double. And I remember at the end of the game, we lost, but I remember my coach coming to me and putting his finger in my chest saying, George, you keep hitting like that. You're the only person that's hitting well on our team right now. You keep hitting like that. And I remember that bus ride home, sitting down and thinking, yeah, that's right. I'm the only one hitting like that. You better remember that, Coach Audius. You better remember that, Coach. I'm the guy that is hitting well. So that spot number 4 that has Jacobus on it, you don't need to think about it any other time. That's my moment. And so I walked up to the plate the next time with a little bit of arrogance. And I missed it. Struck out. I was like, you know what? Hey, fine. It is what it is. I went over 4 that game. And when I began to believe that I was a good hitter, was about the moment that I went into the longest slump that I'd ever been in my career. Only to the point, I was one of 3 seniors on the team. Only to the very last game, never get to step on the field. That's how bad it got. When I began to believe that I didn't need any help. I didn't need to work for it anymore. Think about the moment. I remember the moments when I've thought that I was God's gift to marriage. Hey, I'm really easy to work for. Lindsay, you have no idea how lucky you are to have me. I cook pancakes for breakfast every Sunday night. I do the dishes. I'm easy to get along with most of the time. And you are lucky that I asked you to marry me. Hey, and I know that sounds crazy, but I think all of us struggle with that at times. Like, hey, like we begin to justify ourselves in the awkward moments when in marriage, and we begin to think, hey, I'm great for you. I'm great for you. And it's no surprise that in those moments of pride and arrogance that what happens? Your marriage begins to struggle and suffer. And I could go on and on and on and on and on about the times when pride has entered into my life, when I thought that I was doing things well, only to lead me to destruction, right? Only to lead me to the point where I would just a few weeks or a few months later be at a massive low. And so it's like God knows something. It's like Jesus, from the very first word that he speaks, says, hey, I know you think you have it together, but listen, you need my help. You need my help. You need direction from me. You need saving from me. And you should not think of yourselves more highly than you ought, but rather your desire, your mantra should be, God, I know that I am in desperate need of help. And it's in those moments when I understand that it doesn't all matter, it's not all dependent on me, that I'm the most happy. Right? Have you ever tried to go after something alone? Man, it's hard. No encouragement, no pushing, no accountability. But when you're a part of a team, you're a lot less nervous, right? You're a lot happier. And Jesus stands up and he says, hey, listen, blessed are those, happy are those who understand that they need help. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. For theirs is the kingdom of heaven. One of the biggest areas that we need to know we need help in is rescuing us from our sin. There's a reason that Jesus says this first. Because if the people that are listening to him don't understand that they need rescuing and don't understand that they need to be at a point in their life where they need help, then the rest of the Sermon on the Mount will make no sense to them. And so you and I, the correct response to this, what poor in spirit looks like, at the very beginning means a thankful heart for God saving us. Understanding that we were far away from him. Understanding that we were in complete rebellion against him. And that Jesus came. God sent his Son sitting at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus humbles himself, comes, lives a perfect life, dies on the cross, is buried, raises again the third day, and conquers sin on our behalf. All of our sins, past, present, and future, are heaped on his shoulders. The things that you've done in the past, the things that you're currently doing now, and the things you will do in the future are all heaped on his shoulders. And he pays for that. He restores that. And that relationship that humanity had once with Adam and Eve in the garden is now restored to where we can walk and talk with the Lord. But that wasn't us moving to God. That was God coming all the way to us and rescuing us. And so to be poor in spirit, number one, means to have a thankful heart and an understanding that we've been rescued. And a grateful heart for that sort of rescuing in our life. But I don't think it stops there. I think it actually moves to a deeper level, because I don't think that this is a one time frame in your life experience. That blessed is actually in the Greek a continual action. Is a continual understanding that we need help. That we need help. That all good things come from the Lord. Let me illustrate it like this, and then we'll be finished. When I was a college pastor at Central, I was there for 8 years. And I remember as I was beginning the process of becoming on staff, I came down for one interview, had a phone interview, and then was on a Sunday morning called to be their college pastor. So that Monday morning after the Sunday when I was there sharing my testimony and things, the pastor, Chris, sits me down in his office and says, George, hey, it's time to revision the college ministry. Ever since we moved out to the new location, it began to have a decline. And so I want you to come in. I want you to revision what we're doing. I want you to think and learn. Take a year, and it's going to be hard for you that year. because we're making decisions as a church, which means you won't have any time to meet on Sunday morning. You won't have any time to gather with your students and cast vision for a whole year. But trust me, like a building is coming for you to meet in. And I said, okay, great. I just kind of walked into it a little blind. So here I am, the new guy. I come in the summer. So very few college students are here. I'm the new guy, and I stand up in front of these students for the first time at a leadership retreat. And here's what I tell them. My name is George Jacobus. I'm from Dallas. I came through the college ministry at Central, but I've got some news for you. We have no place to meet on Sunday morning. So what college ministry looked like before, it isn't going to look like that anymore. And not only that, but Chris has asked me to revision the college ministry. And so I'm going to take this time, I'm going to learn about what's going on. But there are probably going to be some subtle changes here that are happening. And some might offend you at times. But just know that God, through my pastor, has called me to this. Let's just say I wasn't the most popular person in the room at the time. Because these people, they didn't sign up for me. They signed up for the last guy. And that last guy ran the college ministry in this way. And now this new guy is showing up who's 28 years old, who is just a few years older than them, and who's telling them that everything is changing. And so to say that first year was tough would be an understatement. I had so many meetings with people, college students, in my office, sitting on the couch, telling me how terrible I was as a college pastor. And George, if we could just hear your heart again. And to be honest, I was tired of sharing my heart with them. I had already shared my heart with them. And so I was learning about what was going on. I was learning about what was happening in college ministry. I was talking to as many people as I could. And about 6 months into it, I was pretty frustrated. And I just decided to tell God about it. I was like, hey, God, you know what? I'm pretty annoyed, to be honest with you. God and I can be really direct at times. Why would you bring me here if I was going to have nothing but infighting, experience nothing, no excitement about what's happening, and yet have battle after battle after battle to fight? I'm trying to learn from people around the country about what's happening in college ministry. I'm trying to become the expert in this field, and I'm hitting nothing but roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And God let me talk. And then only the way that God does. He says, George, I brought you here. And I know it's been difficult. And I know you've experienced roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. And I know you've been asking people all over the country what's happening with the college ministry and what's best for college ministry. But can I ask you a question, George? Why don't you ask me? And oftentimes when God and I have an honest conversation, it ends with that sort of dig, that sort of tough moment. And I sat there and I remember thinking, why didn't I ask God? I mean, I'm a pastor, for crying out loud. Like, that's what I tell people to do, is ask God. Yet here I am, like, in my own strength, in my own story, trying to figure it out. And I realized something. I wanted to be the hero. I wanted to be the guy that got all the accolades. I wanted to be the guy that was looked upon with favor when things went well. And in that moment, God revealed to me that my being poor in spirit is not a one-time thing, but rather it's a continual ethic for all believers. So parents, let me tell you something. When it's struggling and your kids start hitting the teenage years and you don't know what to do, or better yet, you just have kids in general and you don't know what to do. The continuing ethic of what it means to be poor in spirit means to walk in and say, God, I need your help. I need you to move. It's not running to the latest parenting book. to be your first experience, but rather it's running to God saying, hey, give me your wisdom. Hey, career people. Us being poor in spirit means, hey, God, I need your wisdom. I need your direction. I need your insight so that you can take me where you want me to go. You're not the hero of the story. God's the hero of the story. And we need to put ourselves in a place where now our dependence is fully on Him and not on other things. And so my concern with this now is that you walk into Barnes & Noble or you open up the Bible app on your phone and you see almost these self-help sort of devotions or self-help sort of books in there, thinking that if I just had the right mindset or if I had the right knowledge or if I had the right experience, then all of this would be better. And I will tell you, those books are not bad, but they're bad when you run to them first. They're bad when you run to them at the beginning. Because God is saying, hey, the ones who inherit the kingdom of heaven are the ones who understand they need my help. And so from that moment on, when God convicted me of that, our prayer became, as a college staff, my prayer became this: God, will you do something here that can only be described by you moving? God, will you do something here that can't be described by good teaching, good worship, good community, good leaders, or good planning, but will rather only be defined and only be described by a wind of your Spirit moving? And I think about this at this moment at juncture for our church right now. And I just wonder, is there that type of feeling that you have? God, is there that type of begging that you will ask God, God, will you do something that's bigger than calling a new pastor? God, will you do something that's bigger than what can be defined by human understanding? But God, will you do something that can only be defined by you? Because it's the people that live like that have that ethic in their life, who inherit the kingdom of heaven, who see God move. And so my prayer for us as people, as parents, as career people, as married folks, as single folks, as whoever, that we would walk in that type of humility. That God needs to do something. And we need to ask Him continually to do it. And that we need His help. Pray with me.